Wolfgang, so good to see you once again to talk about the form of innovation or shapes of innovation. We've been discussing design sprint, design thinking, and lean startup on the visual form of the product field. And today it's all about push and pull and different, let's say, characters of innovation, right?
Yes, indeed. Michael, good to see you again. What we want to do today is zoom out, so to speak, a little and see what shapes and patterns of innovation we can see if we focus on the overall picture that is emerging from when we do find phase in the work with the product field, when we get a better understanding of what we're good at, what we're not good at, and the kinds of shapes and patterns that emerge from this understanding.
Cool. So how many patterns are we discussing today?
On this level of abstraction, it's basically 4 patterns, which are each centered on one of the elements of innovation. So one of the patterns is centered on idea, one of it is centered on value, one of it is centered on market, and one is centered on resources. And just as a quick recap, as a quick reminder, the idea element describes how drivers are shaping a certain uniqueness in the product while pursuing a business goal. Value is about what problems we are solving for users who have a certain motivation. Market is describing how our distribution reaches certain customers who then prefer our product to the existing alternatives. And resources is describing what resources are enabling us to produce the solution that is embodied in the product.
Okay, so we're looking at 4 different patterns, shapes, one centered around idea, one centered around resources, market, and value, all on the form of the product field, which is basically the form of innovation. So it's about the realization and introduction of new or substantially changed products. Let's get started with, may I pick one?
Yes.
Idea.
So an idea centered or focused approach to innovation is probably best embodied by companies like Apple and products like the iPhone. If you look at Apple, you have an extremely strong driver in the person of Steve Jobs, in the person of Jony Ive, in the whole team of people that are defining the strategy on the company level, on the product level, and that are designing the uniqueness of the product in pursuit of these strategic goals. The goals are extremely ambitious. It's not just about building a product that solves a certain problem or that can compete with a certain range of other products, but it's really about changing the way people interact with technology, is really changing their lives in a certain way. So you have strong drivers, you have ambitious goals, and you have, resulting from that, a really strong uniqueness of the product. And the interesting thing about this approach is what I just described all takes place inside the organization. And Apple, for example, is well known for its extreme secretiveness about their developments. There's a whole industry of so-called leakers who are able to break through this wall of silence every once in a while, and people are waiting for them to tell them about something, what's happening inside Apple. But generally, the strategy is there's a lot of stuff happening inside Apple. They are building iterations on iterations on iterations of products, and only if they are satisfied that the product is unique enough, is strong enough to go to market, then they push it into the market and push it towards people who didn't have an idea that they needed something like an iPhone, that they needed something like a device that combines an internet browser. You maybe remember the first presentation of Steve Jobs where he showed that it's combining the internet and a mobile phone and a music device, and people didn't know that they needed something like that. But once they have an iPhone in their hands, it's like they suddenly realizing, this is what I always wanted. This is what I need. So it's first the product, it's first the idea, and then people realize the value that's in it. And that's why we call this type of strategy, this character of innovation, idea push innovation, because it focuses on the idea quadrant and it pushes the product from inside the company to the market outside of it.
Yeah, thank you. This is idea push innovation visualized. Maybe one question regarding idea push innovation. What does it mean regarding the enablers and the situation between like drivers, enablers, and maybe in terms of like invest? What does it mean to perform such many iterations before that's pushing that thing?
That's an extremely important point, and one that gets overlooked quite a lot when people try to imitate approaches like Apple's. These approaches only work if you're really, really well equipped on the resource end. So you need lots of capital in order to do these many iterations, to build these many prototypes. And these resources have to be, the use of these resources has to be guided in a very, very strategical way. So the drivers have to be a strong control over how the resources are being used. In the case of Apple, the organizational implementation of that is that Apple is an organization where all the different functions that are needed to build products like that are directly coordinated from the top. So there aren't divisions for different types of products, for different market areas, target groups to address. But there is one center of like unification of all the forces at the very top, which makes sure that the prioritization of resource use is consistent over the whole company. That's an extremely important point. So the availability of resources and the way these resources are managed, and without enough resources and a centralized prioritization of their use, such an approach wouldn't work.
Because production needs time.
Yes, as we just recently once again discovered when the new MacBook Pro wasn't announced at the WWDC, because there aren't enough components available right now.
Okay, thank you, Wolfgang. This was idea push, and there are like three other characters we want to talk about. So what should we choose next?
I think the most interesting contrast to idea push would be value pull. So a character of innovation that is very much centered on the value we create when designing and implementing and introducing a new product. And the most well-known implementation of this kind of approach is probably what is called lean startup or customer development. So approaches that are very much starting with which problem do we solve for whom and how they are positioned to buy these products. And the most interesting or clear concrete example for that for me is always Dropbox. Dropbox as a tool that is very, very widespread now, that a lot of people are using to synchronize files between different devices, and that originated in the founder, basically one person having a specific problem themselves. So the origin story goes that they had a crash of their main computer and didn't have any backups. And so were in the situation where they had to spend days recovering their files. and started thinking about, why is this always happening? Why am I so bad at making backups? Why is my stuff scattered across all of those devices and I don't have a central point where I can access my data, where it's safely stored in the cloud, and I just don't have to care about all of this. I want a solution where everything that's on my computer is also mirrored in the cloud without me making explicit backups for it. And then they had the good sense to first ask the question, am I the only person with that problem? And so what he did was basically create a sketch of how a solution could look like, produce a product video and push it out there just to see if other people reacted to that. So he started from a problem he had himself, and before in fact building the solution, before writing lots of software, building lots of infrastructure, validated that other people had this problem too, validated that the solution that he had in mind to this problem was understood and interesting to other people, and only after having validated that started investing more, building product, building infrastructure, rolling out the whole thing. So it started with the idea of, how do I create value? What problem am I solving? And then basically pulled the product out of the company because there was enough resonance in other users and in the market, and there were enough indications that what he was solving was also interesting to other people. There is this quote from, I think Mark Andreessen, but I'm not completely sure, who said that a good product is being pulled out of the company. And that is basically the idea hinter a value pull type of innovation.
Okay, so we moved from the left idea push to the right side of the product field. So from the inside of the organization to the outside of the organization. And what you described like pretty well, that in this case, the founder had the problem himself, and it's a bit like scratching their own itch. So in that very moment, the founder became like the first potential user. But
yes.
Before building the solution, he actually validated, are there other people who have that pain as well?
Yes.
And once he noticed, he realized, oh, there's a lot of like value in solving that problem, and started to build that solution. And it was a value that pulled that idea, the realization of that idea, into his hands first, but then into hands of many other people. So this is value pull. Anything else to add?
No, not at this time. Let's keep going, and
okay.
Let's have a look at another one. And I would suggest to circle in clockwise fashion and take market pull as the next character of innovation, because it's in a certain respect quite similar to value pull. It's based on pull forces that pull the product from within the company to the outside, to the market. But it's also very different in a certain respect, because it doesn't focus on problem solving. It doesn't focus on creating value. It focuses on market entrance and the situation that I find in a specific market, and the opportunities that I find in this specific market, and how I build an innovation around that.
Okay, so let's get into the details of market pull.
Market pull is based on an insight that there is a market segment which is not being delivered a certain type of solution, a certain type of product, and that we can basically fill that gap, fill that void that wants to be filled. In Germany, for quite a number of times, the most for quite a significant amount of time, and for quite a significant number of products, the most successful example for market pull innovation were the Zamba brothers, who first built an empire based around ringtones and later around, basically copying different product ideas, types of solutions, types of problems these solutions solve that they found elsewhere, that they found in other markets. So they didn't have to invent something themselves. They found the solution that exists elsewhere. They basically copied their uniqueness and then just rebuilt the product, repackaged it for a different market. So something like StudiVZ, if people in Germany remember that, is a similar example where someone said, well, there's this thing called Facebook where people connect and share information, and these people are students, and it's about their student life. So build something like that and call it StudiVZ, Studierendenverzeichnis, a very German name for it as well. And if you look at early versions of StudiVZ, if you looked at the CSS code, the class names were directly copied from early versions of Facebook. So they had like signifiers like FA or FB in it. So the process of copying even extended to production, to the very material they were working with. So the basic idea here is, let's focus on where is a market that doesn't have an available solution yet. So there are no alternatives in this specific market segment. There is no Facebook in Germany, for example. There are no ringtones in Germany back in the 90s. So let's focus on that market segment. And then let's basically take an idea that already exists and introduce it to this market that is ready for introduction. And this way, we don't have to care about all the more complicated and more challenging stuff in the upper half of the product field. We don't have to care as much about the more abstract layers, because we can basically just copy stuff that's already there and then focus all our powers on where we're really good at and what we're really good at. And what we're really good at is handling markets. We're really good at distribution. We're really good at reaching customers. Let's focus our forces there and let the market pull the product out of the company to the people who are in the end using it and paying for it.
So this is a market pull, and we have one last character of innovation, and it's on the lower left. It starts with resources. So
exactly. With resources push, there's again a similarity to the previous one, which is it starts in the lower half of the product field. So it doesn't start with thinking about problems and uniquenesses and things like that. But there's also an important difference. It starts with looking at what's available on the inside of the organization. And as the name says, resources push, we are looking at what resources do we have available as of now. What is already there in the company, what we could use in order to produce something new and to bring it to the market. And the most successful example for me and the most interesting example for me for a resources push type of innovation is Amazon Web Services. Amazon, as we all know, it started as a company that's selling books online and then like shifted or expanded into a company that sells everything online, and now is a company that is making most of its profit from renting out infrastructure to do things online to other companies. And this was possible because they had all this infrastructure already themselves, because they sold everything online and needed this infrastructure for that. And at a certain point in time where they started to think about a redesign and a new architecture for the infrastructure, a very smart guy in the company, there's a memo he sent to Jeff Bezos that you can find if you Google it, thought, well, if we're like iterating on our infrastructure anyway, if we're building this new version of our infrastructure anyway, why not build it in a way so we can use it for a secondary business model, which is renting it out to other companies who are in a similar situation as we are, who have a similar need as we have. And they decided, let's give it a shot. Let's build our infrastructure in a way, service-oriented, modular, with lots of APIs exposing functionality, so that we can build this business model on top of it. So they started with what's available. They started with a new version of their infrastructure, and then gradually iterated on how to market that to the outside world. And in the process, kind of discovered which types of problems other companies were solving. And by having a modular and service-oriented approach, they were in a good position to package their solution in different ways to solve different problems for different customers. So starting on the inside with available infrastructure, pushing it out to the market, and then learning on the way made it, as I said, the most profitable business that Amazon has right now. And I think this move towards the right and this move towards the upper half of the product field, and as you are showing this constant learning process, is an extremely important ingredient why Amazon Web Services is so successful and has been so successful, because they didn't stop by just pushing out something based on the infrastructure. They didn't just repackage the content that is available, as lots of media companies are trying to do with like a similar approach right now, but they climbed the ladder of abstraction quite a few steps upwards and started thinking about what kind of problem are we solving for whom, and how can we build and package our solutions in a way that enable other people to build businesses on top of what we are doing. So they started creating real value, and by creating real value, they were able to address a huge market. And by addressing this huge market, they were able to implement a new business idea, a new business model that was built on top of what they were already doing. So they came basically full circle, starting in the resources quadrant. By starting there, pushing something out, and then keeping learning.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Especially the difference that you showed between starting with like resources push, but then not like stopping there. We've repackaged something and it's on the market, but how it helped them to learn and understand the values of the existing resources, and then you're getting better in offering these resources as what you said, like service-oriented modular offering towards the market. So, and maybe this is like true for all the four characters we discussed today.
Yes,
it is like resources push, that they describe a certain innovation at a certain point in time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They describe a starting point for what you're doing. They start at a point where you're really well equipped to do something. If you're well equipped with resources, maybe you should start with resources push. If you have a strong idea and strong drivers, then maybe you should start with idea push. If you have a really good understanding of what value you can create, what problem you can solve, then you should maybe start with value pull. And if you have a good grasp and an opportunity, a good grasp of and an opportunity in the market, then you maybe should start with market pull. The important thing though is if you are aiming for that kind of development that we saw in Amazon Web Services, doesn't guarantee that you are able to do that. So what you illustrated in the case of Amazon Web Services, that it's about learning, that means you as a company, you have to be able to move forward from the starting point. You have to be able to come to a more balanced overall approach of innovation. You start with an idea, but you also have to deliver value. You also have to reach markets, and you have to recognize when you don't. So for example, Apple basically pulling the HomePod was a very good example of pushing something out to the market that didn't have the impact and the scaling potential that they previously thought they had. And then the most reasonable thing to do is just to scrap it and to say, okay, it didn't work in this instance, let's try it in other instances. And I think what happened to the Zamba brothers is a good example of where people weren't able to turn their initial approach of market pull into something longer lasting, into something more balanced, which is probably related to the fact that the market pull approach requires the least amount of creativity and abstraction, because you basically copy everything in the upper half of the product field. So you're less well equipped for a holistic approach and for a balanced approach as when you are necessarily dealing with this upper half. And in the case of resources push, you also see, you have cases where it works, where you have people in companies like Amazon that are able to step up the ladder of abstraction and to deliver something that creates real value. And you have people who are just, as you say, stuck with repackaging and who are not able to do that. And those people will not reach a more balanced and more holistic approach to innovation.
And maybe that leads us to the next thing we're going to discuss about. Let's speak about balance. The next time we've learned about like push and pull forces regarding an innovation and the starting character of innovations. And next we talk about like balance, and maybe it's time to do a quick video about the Hamburg learning flower. So this is my promise for the next time. It was fun today. Thank you, Wolfgang.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you. Bye.